The auctioneer's hammer came down on the plow first, and Samuel Quinlan felt the sound in his teeth like a blow, though he kept his face still as stone while strangers called numbers across his own yard. The iron blade his grandfather had forged shone dull in the morning light, and a merchant from the crossroads town took it for 8 silver marks, which the clerk wrote carefully in his ledger. Next came the horse, a steady bay mare named Copper who had pulled that same plow through 6 planting seasons, and Samuel watched a carter lead her away for 12 marks without looking back, because if he looked back he would break, and he could not afford to break, not today. The standing wheat went in one lot. The buyer contracted to harvest it himself, and then the land deed itself. 40 acres of good bottomland his family had held since his grandfather took the grant after the border wars, went under the hammer for 230 marks, and the total sum came to 270 marks exactly, which was the number Samuel had needed, the number he had calculated down to the last copper piece, the ransom price for a life. The clerk counted the coins into a leather purse, while the new landowner walked the FIELD Chinese letter S with a surveyor. And Samuel took the purse and walked away from the only home he had ever known, without letting himself turn around even once. The road to Bridger's Ford took most of the day on foot, and he arrived as the sun angled low through the stockade posts, casting barred shadows across the dirt. The Bounty Company's yard sat at the north end of the settlement, a compound of rough timber buildings surrounded by a fence topped with sharpened stakes, and Samuel pushed through the gate with the purse heavy against his ribs. Inside the main hall, a handful of men sat at a scarred table playing cards, and they looked up when Samuel entered, their eyes moving from his face to his mud-stained boots and back again, with the casual assessment of men who made their living hunting other people. The one at the head of the table set down his cards and leaned back in his chair, a broad man with a captain's insignia burned into his leather vest. "Help you with something?" the captain asked, his tone making it clear Samuel was interrupting. "I am here about a prisoner," Samuel said. "An orc woman. I was told you are holding her on a blood price claim." The captain's expression shifted slightly, interest sparking behind his eyes. "Told by who?" the magistrate's clerk. "I went to the courthouse first." "He said you logged her as a raid participant 2 months ago, and that she is being held pending sale or payment of the assessed damages." "That is correct," the captain said slowly. 150 marks in theft and destruction, plus our operational fee of 120 marks. Total obligation 270 marks. He said the number like he did not expect anyone to ever pay it, like the orc woman was already sold in his mind. "You planning to make an argument about her innocence? Because the magistrate already reviewed the case." "I am planning to pay it," Samuel said, and he set the leather purse on the table with a sound heavy enough to stop conversation. The captain stared at the purse, then at Samuel. "You are joking." "I am not joking," Samuel said. 270 marks, count it." The captain pulled the purse toward himself and loosened the drawstring, tipping a stream of silver onto the table. The card game forgotten, the other men leaned in to watch as the captain counted, his lips moving silently, stacking coins in neat piles. When he finished, he looked up at Samuel with an expression caught between confusion and suspicion. "This is exact," he said. "How did you know the precise amount?" I asked, Samuel said simply. "Are we concluded?" The captain studied him a moment longer, then shrugged and scooped the coins back into the purse. "Your money, your problem. Kelvin, fetch the orc from the back pen." One of the men rose and disappeared through a rear door, and Samuel waited in silence, his heart hammering now that the transaction was nearly complete, now that he was about to see whether the magistrate's clerk had told him the truth about who was being held here. The clerk had been old and tired and halfway drunk on his lunch break, but he had remembered the case when Samuel asked about orc prisoners, and he had given Samuel a name and a description, and said it was a damned shame because the girl had not been anywhere near the raid and everyone knew it. But the bounty company did not care about truth when there was profit in a body. The rear door opened again, and Kelvin came back with a woman walking in front of him, her hands bound at the wrists with rope. She was tall, perhaps 5.5 feet, with green skin that looked gray in the dim hall and black hair pulled back in a simple braid. Her clothes were rough canvas, a work shirt and trousers both too large, and her feet were bare. She had small tusks that curved up from her lower jaw and pointed ears that twitched slightly when she looked at Samuel, her dark eyes sharp and wary. "This is her," the captain said. Name of Zara Whitestone, claimed as raid participant in the attack on Mercy Creek Settlement, paid in full as of today. He gestured to Kelvin, who cut the ropes at her wrists with a belt knife. "You are released. Get out." Zara rubbed her wrists, her gaze fixed on Samuel now. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice low and careful. "My name is Samuel Quinlan," he said, "and we should leave now." She looked from him to the captain and back, clearly trying to understand what was happening, but she did not argue. Samuel turned toward the door and she followed, and they walked out of the bounty company's hall together into the evening air. The gate closed behind them with a wooden thud, and Samuel kept walking until they were 2 streets away, until the compound was out of sight behind the traders' warehouses, before he stopped and leaned against a hitching post because his legs were suddenly shaking. "I do not understand," Zara said, stopping a few paces away. "Why did you pay my blood price?" Samuel looked at her, this woman he had bankrupted himself to free, and realized he did not have a good answer ready. The truth was complicated and started 3 months ago when he had met her brother Gavin on a river barge heading south. 2 strangers sharing a cargo deck and trading stories to pass the time. But all of that was too much to explain standing in a street at sunset, so Samuel just said, "Your brother asked me to." Zara went very still. "My brother, Gavin." "Yes." "Where is he?" she asked, and there was something fragile in her voice now, something that made Samuel wish he could lie. "He died," Samuel said quietly. 2 weeks ago in River's End. A cart accident. I am sorry." Zara turned away from him, her shoulders hunching forward, and Samuel saw her hands curl into fists at her sides. She did not cry or shout, just stood there breathing carefully, and Samuel stayed silent because there was nothing he could say that would make this news less terrible. Finally, she straightened and turned back to face him. "He asked you to free me," she said. "A stranger. We traveled together for a few days. We became friends." "And you sold everything you owned," Zara said, and Samuel realized she must have heard him talking to the captain. "That money, that was everything." Samuel nodded. "The price was exact. I sold my plow, my horse, and my land. It came to the required amount." Zara stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "You sold your land for me, for someone you have never met." "Your brother saved my life on that barge," Samuel said. "There was a storm and I went overboard and he pulled me out. I owed him a debt, and this was the debt." "A life for a life," Zara said softly. "That is the old way. Gavin always held to the old ways." She looked down at her bare feet, at the dirt road beneath them. "So now I owe you a life debt because you freed me in his name." "You do not owe me anything," Samuel said quickly. "I did what I needed to do. You are free now. You can go wherever you want." Zara looked at him with an expression that was almost pitying. "That is not how debts work," she said. "You gave up everything for me. I cannot just walk away." "I am not asking you to stay," Samuel said, feeling suddenly exhausted, the weight of the day pressing down on him. "I am not asking for anything." "I know," Zara said. "That is why I am staying." They found a room at a cheap boarding house near the river, a single narrow room with 2 cots and a wash basin, and Samuel paid for 3 nights with the last of his loose coins while Zara waited in the hallway. The landlady eyed Zara with open suspicion, but took Samuel's money without comment, and they climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor in silence. Inside the room, Samuel sat down on one of the cots and put his head in his hands, feeling the enormity of what he had done settle over him like a physical weight. He was landless now, homeless, with no trade and no prospects, and winter 4 months away. "Are you all right?" Zara asked from the doorway. "I will be," Samuel said, not looking up. "I just need a moment." He heard her move into the room and close the door, heard the 2nd cot creak as she sat down. They stayed like that for a while, 2 strangers in a borrowed room, until the light through the window turned from gold to blue and Samuel finally raised his head. "Tell me about the raid," he said. "Tell me what really happened." Zara leaned back against the wall, her legs stretched out on the narrow cot. "I was not there," she said flatly. "I was working at Halloran's mill, 30 miles west of Mercy Creek. The raid happened on a 6th-day night. I was in the mill bunkhouse with 11 other workers, and we were there all night because Halloran had us running a double shift to finish an order. When the bounty company came through 2 weeks later, they were rounding up every orc within 50 miles. They did not care about alibis. They said raids never happen alone, that there is always a network, and that I matched the description of one of the attackers." "What description?" Samuel asked. "Female orc, black hair, between 5 and 6 feet tall," Zara said with a bitter smile. "Do you know how many orc women that describes?" "But the bounty company gets paid by the head. They brought in 23 of us. Most paid the blood price within a few weeks. 5 got sold to labor contracts. I was the last one left because Gavin was trying to raise the full amount, and he did not want me signing a contract that would bind me for 10 years. "So you are innocent," Samuel said. "Completely," Zara said, "but the magistrate does not care. The bounty company swears we were part of the raid network, and that is enough for a claim. If I want to prove my innocence, I have to bring my own evidence to the assize court, which meets twice a year. The next session is in spring." "Can you prove it?" Samuel asked. "Maybe," Zara said. "The mill keeps records. Halloran would testify, I think, but it would take time and money to prepare a case, and I have neither." Samuel rubbed his face, thinking. The spring assize is 6 months away. We would need to support ourselves until then, and we would need to find evidence. Zara said, raising an eyebrow. "I told you," Samuel said. "I paid your blood price. That means the bounty company cannot touch you anymore. But if you want your name cleared from the raid records, you need to go before the assize, and I am going to help you do that." "Why?" Zara asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. "You already paid the debt. You do not owe me anything more." "Your brother asked me to help you," Samuel said. "Helping you means more than just getting you out of that compound. It means making sure you have a future." Zara looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. "You are a strange person, Samuel Quinlan," she said finally. "So I have been told," Samuel said, and for the first time that day he felt something almost like a smile tug at his mouth. They spent the next morning asking after work, walking from shop to shop and farm to farm on the outskirts of Bridger's Ford. Samuel had experience with crops and livestock, and Zara had worked in mills and kitchens, but most of the people they spoke to took one look at Zara and said they had no positions available, their voices going flat and their eyes going hard. By midday they were both tired and frustrated, and they stopped at a well in the market square to drink and rest. "This is not going to work," Zara said, sitting on the stone rim of the well. "Nobody is going to hire me, and nobody is going to hire you if I am with you." "Then we will go farther out," Samuel said. "There are homesteads past the ford, past where most people bother to look. Someone will need help." "You are stubborn," Zara observed. "I am practical," Samuel corrected. "We have 2 nights of lodging left and then we need income." "So we will find income." They headed north out of town, following the river road as it curved through farmland and then into rougher country where the fields gave way to forest. The traffic thinned to the occasional wagon, and the settlements grew smaller and farther apart. Around mid-afternoon, they came to a crossroads where a large timber building stood by itself, a 2-story structure with a painted sign that read Merrick's Waystation, and a stable yard crowded with horses and mules. "A roadhouse," Samuel said. "They might need workers." They walked up to the main entrance and pushed through the door into a wide taproom that smelled of stew and wood smoke and old beer. A handful of travelers sat at the tables eating lunch, and behind the bar, a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair was pouring drinks. She looked up when Samuel and Zara approached, her gaze flicking between them with sharp assessment. "Help you?" she asked. "We are looking for work," Samuel said. "Both of us. I can do farm work, animal care, building repair. She has kitchen and mill experience." The woman set down the mug she was filling and crossed her arms. "You are traveling together." "Yes," Samuel said, "and you are vouching for her." "I am." The woman looked at Zara. "Can you cook?" "I can," Zara said. "Bread, stew, roasts, porridge, pies." "I worked kitchen staff at Halloran's mill for 2 years." "Can you handle an oven? The one here is a bastard, burns everything if you do not watch it." "I can handle it," Zara said. The woman drummed her fingers on the bar, thinking. "My cook quit last week. Ran off with a carter and left me scrambling. I need someone who can start immediately and work hard. Hours are long. The pay is room and board plus a half-mark a week each. You would share a room in the back. I am Lionel Merrick. This is my place." Samuel glanced at Zara, who nodded fractionally. "We will take it," he said. "Good," Lionel said. "You start now. Girl, get back in the kitchen and introduce yourself to Petra. She is the serving maid. Boy, go find my husband Thomas in the stable and tell him Lionel sent you. He will put you to work." Samuel left Zara in the taproom and walked out to the stable, a long, low building that housed a dozen horses and smelled strongly of hay and manure. He found Thomas mucking out a stall, a lean man with a weathered face and work-scarred hands. Samuel introduced himself and explained that Lionel had hired them, and Thomas nodded and handed him a second shovel. "We will start with the stalls," Thomas said. "Then feed and water. After that I will show you the rest." They worked in companionable silence for the next few hours, and Samuel found the rhythm of the work soothing, the familiar motions of mucking and hauling and spreading fresh straw. His back ached and his hands blistered, but it was good, honest labor, and it kept his mind occupied, kept him from thinking too much about the farm he had lost. By the time they finished, the sun was setting, and Thomas led him back to the waystation and showed him to a small room off the kitchen where 2 narrow beds were pushed against opposite walls. "You and the orc girl can stay here," Thomas said. "Meals are in the kitchen before the guests eat. Lionel runs a tight operation, so keep up and do not cause trouble." "Understood," Samuel said. He found Zara in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up and her hands dusted with flour. She was pulling loaves of bread from the big stone oven while a young woman with red hair carried plates out to the taproom. The smell of baking bread filled the room, warm and rich, and Samuel realized he had not eaten since morning. "How was your first day?" he asked. Zara slid the last loaf onto the cooling rack and straightened, pushing a strand of hair back from her face. "Busy. Lionel does not tolerate laziness, but the work is straightforward." She looked at him, taking in his dirty clothes and the exhaustion in his face. "How was yours?" "Similar," Samuel said. "Thomas is a good man. The work is hard but fair." "Then we are fortunate," Zara said. "This could have gone much worse." The red-haired serving maid, Petra, came back into the kitchen and grinned at them. "Lyanna says you two can eat now. There is stew in the pot and the bread is fresh. Help yourselves." They ate at the small table in the corner of the kitchen, too hungry to talk much, and afterward they went to their shared room and collapsed onto their respective beds. Samuel fell asleep within minutes, his body giving up the moment he lay down, and he did not wake until dawn when Thomas knocked on the door to tell him the horses needed feeding. The days fell into a pattern after that, a routine of early mornings and late nights and constant work. Samuel took care of the animals and did repairs around the property, fixing loose boards and patching the roof and reinforcing the fence around the stable yard. Zara worked in the kitchen from before dawn until after dark, baking bread and making stew and roasting meat for the steady stream of travelers who stopped at the waystation. They saw each other mostly at meals, brief moments of shared food and tired conversation, and they slept in the same small room like siblings, too exhausted for anything but sleep. Autumn arrived and the weather turned cold, and the traffic on the road increased as traders rushed to complete their routes before winter closed the passes. The waystation was full most nights, and Lyanna hired 2 more serving maids to keep up with the demand. Samuel learned the names of the regular travelers, the carters and merchants and peddlers who stopped at Merrick's every few weeks on their circuit, and he began to listen to their gossip, to the news they brought from other towns. It was a carter named Benson who first mentioned the raids. "Heard there was another attack west of here," Benson said one evening, sitting at the bar with a mug of ale. "Third one this season. They hit a supply wagon on the Ridge Road and made off with 200 marks worth of goods." Samuel, who was wiping down tables nearby, paused to listen. "Did they catch anyone?" he asked. "Not a chance," Benson said. "These bastards are organized. They hit fast and disappear into the forest before the militia can respond. Some say they are operating out of the old mines up in the hills." "Any descriptions?" Samuel asked, trying to sound casual. "The usual," Benson said with a shrug. "Masked riders, orcs mostly. Same group that hit Mercy Creek, probably." Samuel felt something cold settle in his stomach. He glanced toward the kitchen door, but Zara was out of sight, hopefully out of earshot. He finished wiping the table and carried the dirty mugs back to the kitchen, where he found her kneading dough for the morning bread. "Did you hear that?" he asked quietly. Zara did not look up from her work. "I heard. If they are the same group that hit Mercy Creek, and if they get caught, your name might come up again." "I know," Zara said, "which is why we need to clear my name at the assize. I need proof that I was not involved." "We should go back to Halloran's mill," Samuel said. "Get a signed statement from him about your work records." "That will take at least a week of travel," Zara said. "We cannot afford to leave our positions here." "We will talk to Lyanna," Samuel said. "Explain the situation. She might give us leave." But when Samuel approached Lyanna the next day, she shook her head firmly. "I cannot spare both of you," she said. "Not during the busy season. If you leave now, I will have to find replacements, and that means you do not have positions to come back to." Samuel started to argue, but Lyanna held up a hand. "Wait until winter," she said. "Once the roads close, the traffic drops to almost nothing. I can give you a month off then with pay, and your jobs will be waiting when you return. But if you leave now, you leave for good." Samuel reported this back to Zara, and they agreed to wait. The alternative was to quit and travel to the mill immediately, but that would leave them with no income and no place to stay, and winter was too close to risk that. So they kept working, and the weeks passed, and the first snow fell in late 10th month, dusting the waystation roof with white. The work slowed as Lionel had promised, the taproom half empty most nights, and Samuel found himself with more free time than he had had in months. He spent some of it in the stable, reading by lantern light, and some of it in the kitchen talking to Zara while she worked. They had grown comfortable with each other over the months, the initial awkwardness of their situation replaced by easy companionship. And Samuel found that he looked forward to these quiet evenings more than he wanted to admit. One night, as Zara was rolling out dough for hand pies, she asked him about his family. "There is not much to tell," Samuel said, sitting at the kitchen table with a book he was not really reading. "My parents died when I was 15. Fever took them both within a week. I have no siblings. My grandfather's brother moved south before I was born. It was just me and the farm after that." "That must have been lonely," Zara said. Samuel shrugged. "I was used to it, and there were neighbors, people I traded work with during planting and harvest. I was not completely alone." "But you sold it all," Zara said, cutting circles from the dough. 3 generations of work for a stranger. "For a debt," Samuel corrected. "And because it was the right thing to do." Zara set down her cutting tool and looked at him. "Do you regret it?" she asked, and there was something vulnerable in her voice, something that made Samuel's chest tighten. "No," he said firmly. "I do not regret it. Even though you have nothing now, I have work," Samuel said. "I have a roof over my head. And I have a friend, which is more than I had when I was alone on that farm." He paused, then added quietly, "I do not regret it, Zara. Not any of it." She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded and went back to her work. They did not talk about it again, but something shifted between them that night. Some unspoken understanding that settled into place like the last piece of a puzzle. When the snow was deep enough that the main road became impassable, Lionel called them both into the taproom and handed them a small purse. "1 month's leave," she said. "Paid in advance. I expect you back before the thaw. Do whatever you need to do." They left the next morning, bundled in borrowed coats and carrying travel packs that Thomas had helped them put together. The walk to Halloran's mill took 6 days through snow-covered forest, and they stayed at small waystations and farmhouses along the way, paying for their lodging with the money Lionel had given them. They talked as they walked, long, rambling conversations about nothing and everything, and Samuel found that he liked the sound of Zara's voice, liked the dry humor that came out when she was relaxed. Halloran's mill was a sprawling complex on the edge of a half-frozen river, the water wheel locked in ice and the buildings quiet for the winter. They found Halloran himself in the main office, a stocky man with ink-stained fingers who looked up from his ledgers with surprise when Zara walked in. "Zara Whitestone," he said, rising from his chair. "I heard you were arrested. Are you all right?" "I am free now," Zara said, "but I need your help. The bounty company claimed I was part of the Mercy Creek raid, and I need to prove I was here working on the night of the attack." "Can you provide a statement?" Halloran's expression darkened. "That is ridiculous. You were here. I remember that night specifically because we ran the double shift and you worked the ovens until dawn. I can swear to it." "I need it in writing," Zara said, "with your seal, for the assize court." "Of course," Halloran said immediately. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began writing, his pen scratching quickly across the page. When he finished, he pressed his personal seal into the hot wax at the bottom and handed it to Zara. "Take this. And if you need me to testify in person, send word. I will be there." Zara took the paper carefully, folding it and tucking it into her coat. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was thick with relief. They also visited the bunkhouse where Zara had lived, and Samuel spoke to 3 of the other workers who remembered her from that night. Two of them agreed to provide written statements, which they signed and dated, and Samuel collected these carefully and added them to their growing pile of evidence. By the time they left the mill a week later, they had 5 separate documents attesting to Zara's presence 30 miles away from Mercy Creek on the night of the raid, and Samuel felt a cautious optimism that they might actually win her case. The journey back to the way station was slower because a new storm had moved in, dumping fresh snow on the already difficult roads. They made it halfway before the weather forced them to stop at a tiny settlement called Pine Ridge, where the only inn was a converted barn with 3 rooms and a communal fire. They shared one of the rooms, the only space available, and sat close to the fireplace in the common room while the wind howled outside. "You think it will be enough?" Zara asked, staring into the flames. "The statements." "I do not know," Samuel admitted. "But it is more than most people bring to the assize, and you have Halloran's seal, which carries weight. If the assize rules in my favor, the record will be cleared," Zara said slowly, "which means I could go anywhere, do anything." Samuel felt something twist in his chest, but he kept his voice even. "That is good. That is what we have been working toward." "Yes," Zara said, but she did not sound happy about it. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "Samuel, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What will you do?" After the assize, Samuel had been avoiding thinking about this question for weeks, but now that she had asked it, he could not dodge any more. "I do not know," he said honestly. "I suppose I will keep working at the way station. Lionel seems pleased with my work. It is steady employment." "You could buy land again," Zara said, "if you saved enough." "Maybe," Samuel said, though the thought of starting over, of building a farm from nothing, felt impossibly daunting. "Or maybe I will stay where I am. There is something to be said for simplicity." Zara was quiet for a moment, then said, "I am glad you are my friend, Samuel Quinlan." "I am glad you are mine," Samuel said, and meant it completely. They made it back to the way station 2 days before the month was up, and Lionel greeted them with obvious relief. "Thank the gods," she said. "I was starting to worry you had frozen to death. Get yourselves warm and rested. We start back to full work tomorrow." The winter deepened, and the way station settled into its quiet season rhythm. Samuel and Zara fell back into their work routines, but something had changed between them during their journey, some intimacy that had not been there before. They spent more time together in the evenings, talking by the kitchen fire or walking through the snow-covered stable yard, and Samuel found himself noticing small things about her that he had not paid attention to before. The way she hummed while she worked, the small smile that appeared when she was pleased with how a dish turned out, the careful way she braided her hair each morning. He realized with a start one evening while watching her stir a pot of soup, falling in love with her. The realization terrified him. He had freed her because of a debt to her brother, because it was the right thing to do, not because he expected anything in return. And she had stayed with him out of obligation, out of her own sense of debt, not because she wanted to. The last thing he wanted was to make her feel trapped, to make her think she owed him something more than she had already given, so he said nothing. He kept his feelings locked away and focused on being her friend, on helping her prepare for the assize, on maintaining the comfortable companionship they had built. But it was harder now, harder to watch her across the room and not imagine a future where they were more than friends, where they had built something together that was theirs. The assize was scheduled for the first week of spring, and as the date approached, Samuel and Zara began preparing their case in earnest. They reviewed their statements every evening, making sure they had every detail memorized, and they drafted a written petition that outlined Zara's alibi and the evidence supporting it. Samuel wrote to Halloran asking if he would be willing to travel to Bridger's Ford to testify, and Halloran sent back a letter saying he would be there. But 2 weeks before the assize, everything went wrong. A merchant train was attacked on the road just north of the waystation, the largest raid yet. 6 wagons were hit, their goods stolen and their guards killed, and the survivors reported seeing a group of at least 15 raiders, all orcs, who disappeared into the forest before the militia could respond. The news sent shockwaves through the district, and the bounty companies immediately mobilized, rounding up every orc they could find for questioning. Samuel heard about it from a militia rider who stopped at the waystation for a meal, and he went straight to the kitchen to find Zara. She was alone, thank God, and when he told her, she went very pale. "They are going to come here," she said. "They are going to take me." "No," Samuel said firmly. "You are not on the watch list anymore. I paid your blood price. You are legally clear." "That does not matter," Zara said. "You heard what happened after Mercy Creek. They round up anyone who looks suspicious and sort it out later. And I am an orc living on the border. That makes me suspicious." "Then we will leave," Samuel said. "Right now. We will go to Bridger's Ford early and stay there until the assize." "And abandon our positions?" Zara asked. "Samuel, we need this work. We need the income." "We need you safe more," Samuel said. "Come on. We can be packed in 10 minutes. But before they could move, they heard the sound of horses in the yard and then Lionel's voice calling for Samuel. He stepped out of the kitchen to find 4 men in Bounty Company leathers standing in the tap room, and his heart sank. It was the same captain who had held Zara before, the broad man with the burned insignia, and he looked at Samuel with recognition and something like satisfaction. "Quinlan," the captain said, "fancy meeting you here." "Where is the orc?" "She is not part of this," Samuel said. "Her blood price was paid. She is clear." "New raid, new claim," the captain said. "We are authorized to detain anyone with previous connections to raiding activity." "That includes your orc friend." "She was never connected to raiding activity," Samuel said, his voice rising. "You know that. You took my money under false pretenses, and now you want to do it again." "Easy, boy," the captain said. "We are just doing our job." "Now bring her out or we will search the building." Zara stepped out of the kitchen before Samuel could respond, her face calm but her hands clenched at her sides. "I am here," she said, "but I am not going with you." The captain smiled. "That is not your decision." "It is if you want to avoid a legal battle," Zara said. "I have evidence that I was not involved in the Mercy Creek raid, and I am prepared to present it at the assize. If you detain me now, you are interfering with my right to petition the court, and that is illegal." The captain's smile faded. "You are bluffing." "Try me," Zara said, and there was steel in her voice now. "I have written statements from 5 witnesses placing me 30 miles away from Mercy Creek on the night of the raid. I have my employer's sworn testimony under seal. And I have a petition already filed with the assize court. If you take me now, I will file a complaint against your company for unlawful detention, and the magistrate will not be pleased." The captain looked at her for a long moment, clearly trying to decide if she was serious. Finally he said, "Fine, but you are not leaving the district. If you run, we will find you." "I am not running," Zara said. "I will be at the assize. You can count on it." The bounty men left, and Samuel let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Zara sagged against the wall, her bravado crumbling now that the immediate danger was past. "That was close," Samuel said. "Too close," Zara agreed. "Samuel, if they link me to this new raid, they will not," Samuel said. "You have been here at the waystation for months. You have dozens of witnesses who can place you here every single day. They have nothing." "Unless the real raiders get caught and they claim I was involved," Zara said. "Unless they say I was part of the network." Samuel had not thought of that. Then we need to find the real raiders, he said slowly. We need to bring them in before the assize. That is impossible, Zara said. We are not bounty hunters. We have no training, no resources. We have information, Samuel interrupted. Think about it. We have been here for months, listening to travelers, hearing about the raids. We know more about the pattern than most people, and we have motivation. If we can find the raiders and turn them in, it clears you completely. Zara looked at him like he had lost his mind. This is insane. Probably, Samuel agreed. But do you have a better idea? She did not. So over the next week they began to investigate. They talked to every traveler who came through the waystation, asking casual questions about the raids, about what was stolen and where and when. Samuel borrowed maps from Thomas and marked the locations of each attack, looking for patterns. Zara went through the old news notices in the taproom, reading accounts of the raids and noting the details. A picture began to emerge. The raids were not random. They targeted specific types of cargo, trade goods, coins, high-value supplies. They avoided passenger coaches and simple farm wagons, and they always happened in the same general area, a stretch of road about 20 miles long that passed through heavily forested hills north of the waystation. They are operating out of those hills, Samuel said, studying the map. Benson was right about the mines. There are old quarry sites up there, abandoned for years, perfect hiding places. So what do we do? Zara asked. Walk up there and ask them to turn themselves in? No, Samuel said. We watch. We wait for the next raid and we follow them back to their hideout. Then we report it to the militia. It was a terrible plan, reckless and dangerous, but they could not think of anything better. So they started spending their free time on the road north of the waystation, hidden in the tree line, watching the traffic pass. It was cold and boring work, and they saw nothing for days. But then, on the 8th day, they heard the sound of shouting and saw a group of riders sweep out of the forest and surround a merchant wagon. Samuel and Zara watched from their hiding spot as the raiders, maybe a dozen of them with masks covering their faces, forced the wagon to stop and began transferring its goods to their own horses. The whole operation took less than 10 minutes, and then the raiders were gone, melting back into the forest as quickly as they had appeared. "Come on," Samuel whispered, and they followed at a distance, moving through the trees as quietly as they could. The raiders were confident, not checking behind them, and they led Samuel and Zara straight into the hills to an old quarry site where several stone buildings still stood intact. The raiders dismounted and began unloading their stolen goods, and Samuel counted 14 people, a mix of orcs and humans working together. "We have them," Zara breathed. "We need to get back and report this." They retreated carefully, not risking discovery, and hurried back to the waystation. Samuel found the militia rider who had been stationed at Bridger's Ford and told him everything, drawing a map to the quarry and describing what they had seen. The rider took the information seriously and promised to organize a raid within 2 days. "Stay out of it from here," the rider warned. "This is militia business now." They agreed, but 2 days later they heard that the militia raid had been successful. All 14 raiders were captured at the quarry site along with stolen goods worth over 1,000 marks. The news spread quickly, and Samuel felt a surge of relief that was almost painful in its intensity. "It is over," he said to Zara that evening as they sat in the kitchen. "You are clear. When the assize reviews the evidence, they will see that you were not part of the raiding network. They will strike your name." Zara looked at the statements spread out on the table, at the months of work they represented. "I cannot believe we did it," she said softly. "We make a good team," Samuel said, and she smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes, and Samuel felt his carefully controlled feelings surge up again, stronger than ever. The assize convened on the second day of spring, and Samuel and Zara traveled to Bridger's Ford together, arriving the day before the session. Halloran met them there, as promised, and together they reviewed their case one last time. The courtroom was a large hall in the center of town, and when they entered, Samuel saw that it was already crowded with petitioners and observers. The magistrate, an older woman with sharp eyes and a stern expression, called cases in order of filing, and Zara's petition came up mid-morning. She stood before the bench and presented her evidence, speaking clearly and calmly about her alibi and the statements supporting it. Halloran testified under oath that Zara had been working at the mill on the night of the Mercy Creek raid. The bounty company captain tried to argue that the evidence was insufficient, but the magistrate cut him off. The petitioner has provided multiple sworn statements from credible witnesses, the magistrate said. Furthermore, the actual perpetrators of the Mercy Creek raid have now been apprehended, and none of them have identified the petitioner as an accomplice. The blood price claim against Zara Whitestone is hereby dismissed, and her name is struck from the raid records. Additionally, the court finds that the bounty company detained the petitioner on insufficient evidence and is liable for damages in the amount of 50 marks, to be paid to the petitioner within 30 days. The gavel came down, and it was over. Zara stood there for a moment, looking stunned, and then she turned to Samuel with tears in her eyes. "We did it," she said, and Samuel pulled her into a hug, not caring who was watching. They collected the court's written judgment and walked out into the spring sunlight, and Samuel felt lighter than he had in months, maybe years. Zara was free, truly free, and she had money coming that would give her a real start at a new life. "What will you do now?" he asked as they walked back toward the boarding house where they were staying. Zara was quiet for a moment. "I do not know," she said finally. "I thought I would know once this was over, but now I just feel lost." "You have options," Samuel said. "You could go back to the mill, or find work somewhere else. You could travel, see other places." "I could," Zara agreed, "but I do not want to." Samuel stopped walking. "What do you want?" Zara turned to face him, and there was something in her expression that made his heart start to race. "I want to stay with you," she said. "I know I do not owe you a debt anymore. I know I am free to go, but I do not want to go. I want to stay." "Zara," Samuel said carefully, "you do not have to stay out of obligation. I freed you so you could have your own life." "This is my own life," Zara said, her voice rising slightly. "This with you. Working at the waystation, building something together. That is what I want. Unless you do not want that, unless I have been reading this wrong." "You have not been reading it wrong," Samuel said quickly. "I want that too. I have wanted it for months, but I did not want to say anything because I did not want you to feel pressured." Zara laughed, a sound that was half relief and half exasperation. "You are an idiot," she said fondly. "We have both been idiots." "Agreed," Samuel said, and then he kissed her, right there in the middle of the street, and she kissed him back, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. They returned to the waystation a week later, and Lyanna took one look at them and rolled her eyes. "About time," she said. "I was starting to think you two would never figure it out." "You knew?" Samuel asked, surprised. "Everyone knew," Lyanna said. "You were not exactly subtle. Now get back to work. The spring traffic is picking up." They fell back into their routines, but everything was different now. They were together, openly and happily, and the other workers at the waystation accepted it without comment. Samuel moved his few possessions into Zara's side of the room, and they talked late into the nights about their future, about what they wanted to build together. When the bounty company paid Zara her 50 marks in damages, they sat down with Lyanna and Thomas to discuss possibilities. The way station was doing well, but Lyanna was getting older and had been talking about wanting to reduce her workload. Over several evenings, they worked out an arrangement. Samuel and Zara would use the 50 marks as a down payment to buy a partnership stake in the way station, with the balance to be paid over the next 5 years out of their share of the profits. "It is a good investment," Thomas said as they signed the papers. "This place has been here for 30 years and it will be here for 30 more. You will have security and you will be your own bosses." Samuel looked at the deed, at their names written together in careful script. Samuel Quinlan and Zara Whitestone, partners. It was not the farm his grandfather had built, but it was theirs, something they had earned together, and that made it more valuable than any inheritance. The summer brought steady business, and they worked hard to make the way station even better. Zara expanded the kitchen, adding new dishes that drew travelers from miles around. Samuel built a new wing onto the stable, increasing their capacity, and he started a small garden behind the building where they grew vegetables for the kitchen. They hired additional staff, including a young orc woman named Mira who had been turned away from every other establishment in the district, and they made it clear that the way station welcomed everyone. By autumn, they had paid off a quarter of their debt to Lyanna, and the older couple announced that they would be retiring to live with their daughter in the south. "The place is yours," Lyanna said, signing over the remaining stake. "We will take the balance owed in payments as agreed. Take care of it." Samuel and Zara stood in the taproom that evening, looking at the deed that now bore only their names, and Samuel felt a swell of emotion so strong it nearly choked him. They had started with nothing, 2 people thrown together by circumstance and debt, and they had built this. "We should get married," Zara said suddenly. Samuel turned to look at her. "Is that a proposal?" "It is a statement of fact," Zara said, but she was smiling. "I love you, Samuel Quinlan. I want to build a life with you. I want this to be ours in every way." "Then yes," Samuel said. "Let us get married." They were married on the first day of winter, in the taproom of their way station, with Halloran and Petra and Mira, and a dozen regular travelers as witnesses. The local priest, a practical woman who cared more about sincerity than about species, performed the ceremony, and when she pronounced them married, Samuel kissed Zara in front of everyone and felt like the luckiest man alive. They hung the deed on the wall behind the bar, both their names clearly visible, a testament to what they had built together. That night, after the guests had left and the way station was quiet, they stood in the taproom and looked at it. "Your grandfather's farm was 3 generations of work," Zara said softly. "This is only 2 years, but it is ours." "It is better than the farm," Samuel said, "because we built it together, because you are here." Zara leaned her head against his shoulder. "I am glad you are such a foolish man," she said, "selling everything for a stranger. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking that some debts are worth paying," Samuel said, "and I was right." They stood there for a while longer, looking at their names on the deed, at the taproom they had filled with warmth and welcome, at the future they had built from nothing. And Samuel thought about the auctioneer's hammer falling on his plow, on his horse, on his land, and he felt no regret, only gratitude that the path had led him here, to this woman, to this life. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, dusting the way station roof with white, and inside, Samuel and Zara Quinlan turned down the lamps and headed to their room together. The years that followed brought their share of challenges and triumphs. The way station thrived under their management, becoming known throughout the district as a place of fair dealing and good food. They weathered bad winters and difficult seasons. They dealt with problem guests and supply shortages, and they handled it all together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame, In their third year of marriage, Zara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with a mixture of joy and terror, neither of them quite believing they were ready for parenthood, but both determined to try their best. When their daughter was born on a warm day in late spring, they named her Willa, and she had Zara's green skin and Samuel's brown eyes and her own fierce temperament from the very start. Willa grew up in the waystation, toddling around the taproom and learning to bake bread at her mother's side, and she charmed every traveler who passed through. When she was 3, Zara gave birth to a second daughter, Penny, who was quieter than her sister but just as determined. The waystation rang with children's laughter now, and Samuel found that fatherhood suited him in ways he had never expected. As the girls grew, Samuel and Zara taught them the business, showing them how to manage the kitchen and the stable, how to deal with difficult customers and negotiate with suppliers. They taught them about fairness and hard work, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity regardless of their species or background. And they told them the story of how their parents had met, about the debt and the sacrifice and the love that had grown from unlikely beginnings. On the 10th anniversary of the day Samuel had paid Zara's blood price, they threw a celebration at the waystation. Halloran traveled from his mill to attend, and Mira, who now managed her own small inn 2 towns over, came with her husband and children. The taproom was packed with friends and regular customers, and someone proposed a toast to the unlikely couple who had built something lasting from nothing. Samuel stood with his arm around Zara, their daughters playing at their feet, and looked around at the life they had created. The waystation was more than just a business now. It was a home, a community, a place where people of all kinds could find welcome and warmth. And it had all started with a foolish decision to sell everything he owned for a woman he had never met. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not paid my blood price?" Zara asked him quietly that evening after the guests had left and the girls were asleep. "No," Samuel said honestly, "because I cannot imagine a world where I did not. Every choice I have made since then has led me here to you, to this life, and I would not change any of it." Zara kissed him, soft and sweet, and they stood together in the taproom of their waystation, under the deed that bore both their names, surrounded by the life they had built together from sacrifice and hope and love. The hammer had fallen on his old life, but it had opened the door to something better, something neither of them could have found alone. And standing there with Zara in his arms, Samuel knew that some prices were worth paying, some debts were worth honoring, and some strangers were worth everything you had, because she had never left his side, and he had never wanted her to.